Hello guys, once again it's Matt and today we have another video. Thank you all the members, all the Patreons, make sure to subscribe and let's get into it guys. So today I wanted to talk a little bit about 5 things that I see people doing wrong using radar missiles or in general just BVR fights, right? 5 things that are very important for you to know. I already did some videos talking about, I will leave the playlist right here, that I basically show you how to properly do these maneuvers that I will show to you guys. But here I will try to explain these errors that I see a lot of people doing and a little bit on how to correct. Okay, so first mistake that I see people doing is basically after you get a lock, imagine that you are flying high, you are in an F-16 over here, we are in Canvas, so sorry about the simple things here, but you know how it is. But yeah, fighting a MiG-29, you are in an F-16, you just fired an R-27, you just fired an Sparrow. If you actually, for example, in this particular example, if you actually continue to fly directly straight to the target, the enemy's missile, for example, being an R-27 ER, will get to you first before the Sparrow even gets to the target there, which means that you are in a disadvantage aerodynamically, right, energy-wise, making the target have a very good advantage on you. So how do you actually prevent this? I see a lot of people just flying towards the enemy missiles, right? How do you actually prevent this? So shortly, just after you shot your missile, you will be doing a turn as much as you can without losing the lock with the gimbal limits of your radar in mind to one of the sides, maybe left or right. This is called the cranking, okay? You can also actually add this together with lowering your nose to gain speed and lowering your altitude to make the enemy's missile go through thicker air as well, which helps a little bit, and also increasing the power of the aircraft if it's not already in afterburner, right? So what this means is that you will make the missile of the target work harder than your missile needs. So in this example, for example, we just fired the Sparrow, he fired an R-27. He's going to just continue flying straight. I am going to turn to the right over here. So I turn to the right while maintaining the lock, obviously with the gimbal limits in mind of the radar. This is kind of a extreme gimbal limit. It's not that much in the F-16, but you get the idea. You will continue to fly directly to the right, making sure that you lower the nose and gain speed, okay? This will mean that if the target continues to fly, the Sparrow will continue its flight path there, and the R-27 will actually have to turn and predict a point. While it's doing that, my Sparrow is just flying very straight from the original point, right? Let me just put this right here. It was shot from right here. So it's just flying directly to the target, having way more energy than the R-27 that it's needing to intercept an impact point over here, making your missile hit the target first, then his missile hitting you. This is the most basic level of a cranking, but this key can be even used multiple times. For example, I don't know, maybe the R-27 will still hit you, because the R-27ER is a very powerful missile. So you can actually turn to the other side and basically do a flight path to that side while maintaining, again, the gimbal limits of your radar, maintaining the lock, right? This will mean that your Sparrow from the get-go was flying straight, but the R-27 had to do this turn, and then you will need to actually do another turn to the other side. Let me just copy this just to show to you, making it oh, why is it not working? Come on, work. Yeah. And then making it need to turn. Basically, it was going for there. And now it's going to need to turn and intercept another impact point to the other side, making it lose a lot of energy doing this while this turns, making it very successfully, a very easy way to actually defeat the missile while you were just locking the target and the missile is hitting the target. This is the most effective thing of doing defensively that you can still maintain an offensive position. How to do this proper maneuver, I already have videos on it, but just to let you know. You can do this how many times you want, making the missile go to the left, to the right, to the left, to the right, until it loses the energy and your missile hits, okay? But the second thing is that, what if you cannot even fire a missile? You wasn't able to do that. Let's just reset, for example, here. We were just flying straight to the target over here, and he fired a missile on you. But you couldn't fire a missile, or even if you did, but the missile that you know that the missile that he's fired is coming towards you way before. I don't know how, you just know, or when you are feeling insecure about stuff. You know, you don't know, you are getting locked, but you don't know exactly if there is a missile or not in the air. So what do? Instead of just cranking, doing like a perpendicular kind of flying, you will do a, diagonal kind of flying, you will do a perpendicular flying. So instead of just flying to kind of a diagonal kind of line over here, you will do a 90-degree turn. So you will do this basically. And this will make the filtering methods that pulse Doppler radars of modern aircraft that they use basically will make you be blind for them. You will not blind, like invisible to them, right? You will make that not only the radar of the aircraft, but also the missile will actually filter you out, thinking it's a standing still thing, which is a ground clutter. So it basically filters you out and you are invisible to the target. How much you need to turn, how perpendicular, it depends on the aircraft that it's firing on you. For example, the F-16 has the lower amount of blind speeds in the game. It has 30 meters per second on the APG-66. So you need to be very precise on the perpendicular flying. Although, for example, the F-14 has 150, if I'm not mistaken. So you don't need to actually fly that perpendicular if it's an F-14, because the radar is older, so it is a little bit easier to get to the blind speed relative to the target. Remember, this invisible kind of thing, it's not due to the perpendicular flight itself. Basically, the idea here is to basically zero the speed between you and the target. The actual pulse Doppler radar needs two speeds to actually detect the target. It needs the speed of his aircraft and the speed of your target that it gets from distance over time changes during the radiation bouncing back from you, basically, right? So once this is out of the way, because it's showing 0, for example, because it's not changing, the radar thinks this is a ground clutter and it will just filter out. You will be like, there's nothing here, and the missile will completely miss. So this is a very, very good way to actually make sure that you stay alive, okay? Will it work every single time? No. It depends on the distance. It depends on many things. But overall, this would be the main thing. This can be combined with the third thing that we talked about, Chaff. So that we're going to talk about Chaff. How Chaff works. Why people complain so much about Chaff, and why people don't know how to use Chaff. So the third thing that can be used with the second thing is the Chaff usage. Okay, so what happens here? Why, when you fire a Chaff and a missile is coming, the missile doesn't go to the Chaff? Why this is happening? Why isn't it like a flare? Well, because you have to think about like it's a radiation, it's a wave of radio waves, okay? It's being emitted from the aircraft. Imagine that this is a wave. It will touch the nose and the aircraft itself, and it will basically bounce back. Once it bounces back, it will go to the missile, and that information will give the missile the position of the target, and it will, the autopilot, know where to turn to actually intercept the target. Okay, this is how it works. So radiation being emitted until it hits the target bounces back the radiation, it gets to the missile knows where the target is. Okay, so why dropping Chaff after you, or just one Chaff, for example, might not make the missile go to the Chaff? Because you are closer to the target or to the missile than the Chaff, making you a larger target, bouncing back larger amounts of radio waves, which means that, first of all, it's bouncing back first on you, and then afterwards on the target. So the first thing that the missile actually receives is your radiation bouncing back, not the Chaff's, because you are closer to the missile than the Chaff. And also, normally the Chaff radiation is very small, you know? It's something that not a lot of people think about, but the radiation bouncing back when it hits both of the targets, the radiation bouncing back from the aircraft will be much larger than the bouncing back radiation from these small, like little aluminum little things of chaff, which means that the missile will go to the largest source of radiation, which is the aircraft, not the chaff. How do you provide the chaff to work properly? Well, it has many things. The objective is to make the chaff as large as possible, okay? How do you do that? Well, there are certain tactics that you can do. Basically, one of them is making sure that the chaff is a little bit closer to your aircraft, or at least to the missile, than you. So in that sense, same like thing, you need to basically remember all the time this, you need to make the radiation bouncing back from the aircraft be smaller than the radiation bouncing back from the chaff. This is the objective. Once this happens, the missile will go to the chaff and not to the aircraft. That means that if you, for example, fly getting away from the target, that's why, for example, flying cold and dropping chaff is so effective against radar missiles, because the radiation bouncing back from the chaff will be closer, meaning it will be larger than the radiation bouncing back from the aircraft itself, meaning that the missile will go to the chaff, not to the aircraft. Other things that you can do is actually drop so much chaff that the target actually becomes, the chaff target becomes larger than the other one. So if you drop so much chaff, like for example, a chaff priority, or even the larger chaff, like in the MiG-23s, for example, they have the larger countermeasures, it's so big, and using the chaff like priority will mean that it's such a large area of chaff being deployed that it will create a very large position of radio waves bouncing back to the missile, making the missile go to the chaff as well. So combine these two informations as you will with the notching, and the cranking even. You can see that, for example, cranking, basically because you are going towards the target, it's not the most effective thing to use chaff. So basically what I'm saying is that it's basically useless to use chaff as long as you are going to the target like this, As long as you are straight to the target, don't use chaff unless the missile is actually behind you. That's the thing. You need to put chaff between you and the missile, and it will work every single time, or at least get enough chaff out there that it will confuse the missile. Remember, the closer you are to a target, the closer you are to the missile, the closer you are to the chaff, the larger the chaff. All these things change the way the the missile will react to chaff, okay? Hopefully it wasn't confusing enough, but just remember, rule of thumb, the chaff needs to be a bigger bouncing back radiation, bouncing back thing, radio waves thing, or whatever you want to call it, than the aircraft itself. It's the only way that you will make the missile go to the chaff and not the aircraft, okay? The fourth one is actually choosing targets, okay? Choosing targets is more of an offensive kind of position over here. Very kind of small thing that I wanted to talk about. And it's basically, guys, don't try to fire missiles on targets that are notching you. Don't fire the missile straight from the get-go. Wait for the target to actually, commit or not. You will see a lot of the things happening in the game that sometimes the target just turns around. In gold codes, there's a lot of F-14s that do that. But sometimes it's just they're going completely blind to you. So wait a little bit. Choose your targets carefully. If you have an INS missile, change the targets between the flight if you need to. For example, the R-27s and the AIM-54s, you can technically, I don't know about the AIM-54. I would think that it can, but the R-27ERs, for example, you can fire the missile. If the target went cold, change the target. You still have time to change the target. The Sparrows, they do not have that option, but still, that's why you need to be even more careful. And that's one of the main problems with the Sparrow, right? I think the Sparrow is a missile that you need to be a little bit more careful when you are firing, not as trigger happy as an R27 or an M54, just because of that. Because if he loses the target, it will self-explode. So you need to choose the target correctly, okay? So always remember to choose the target that is not that far from you if you are starting in BVR, 10, 20 kilometers max. Don't fire at 40 kilometers. Later, you will be able to get 40 kilometers once you are used to BVR and stuff, so don't worry. So just to start to get used to it if you are a new player, okay? And the last thing, a minor one as well, why flying low to the ground makes the missile go to the ground instead of the aircraft. This is one of the most, impressive and most used defensive maneuvers that I see people doing, but sometimes I see people not paying attention to it. So remember, what happens here? See at F-16, we are the F-16. This is the radio waves being emitted by the radar itself, by the APG-66, right? We have a Sparrow launched because I got a lock on the target. And you can see the radiation would basically just come and come. This is the speed of light, obviously pretty fast. And once it hits the target, you can see that it's going to hit the ground as well, right? It will be hitting so much ground over here that it will bounce back a lot of radiation, not only for the aircraft itself, but for the ground as well. And since the ground is a much larger, thing than an aircraft, it will make that basically the filtering system of the pulse Doppler opening this kind of gap here so that it can actually see the aircraft in that sense, because it's actually looking at this amount of radiation that it's moving. A lot of the radiation here is so much radiation that it will basically overwhelm the system, and it will fill up the gaps that it's trying to do to actually filter out the ground, which means that a lot of the radiation that comes from the aircraft will bounce back not only from the aircraft but to the ground as well. And with that radiation bouncing back to the missile, it will basically confuse the missile head. The missile head will think that the target is a little bit lowered because it's having so much radiation coming from below, which means that the missile will hit the ground and not the aircraft, okay? This is a major thing that a lot of people need to know. If you don't know how to do BVR, if you don't know how to evade radar missiles, and especially if you want to stay offensive without doing the cranking, or if you want to do basically an offensive pincher maneuver, or I don't know, any type of very, very offensive maneuvers, you need to fly low. It's the only way to actually fly directly in the 12 o'clock of an aircraft being fired upon, with missiles, and stay alive. It's literally the only way. Chaff will not solve your problem over here. So just to recap, first thing, crank the aircraft, turn to the left, turn to the side, make the missile of the enemy lose energy. If you cannot do that and you will be hit, make sure to notch, fly perpendicular to the missile and the target. It will make you invisible. Use your chaff correctly. Remember, when you are flying directly to the target, chaff will basically not work. So yeah, use a lot of chaff or fly code and then drop chaff. It's the only way to make chaff work properly. Choose your targets carefully. You need to fire on a target that you are trying to kill. You're not just wasting missiles, but there is no harm in missing missiles as well, guys. Remember, you're not the main thing is not losing your aircraft. Missing missiles are just weapon systems. So if you miss all the BVR missiles that you have, it doesn't matter. The objective is that you were trying to actually kill targets from, a very far away distance, or at least a head-on if it's a low-range shot. And last one, remember this tactic. If you're going to be very offensive, or if you don't know what you're doing in BVR, just fly very low to the ground, and you will be basically safe from any radar missiles. Okay, of course, larger missiles like the M54 can have enough HE explosive to actually destroy you, so you have to be careful, but still, it is one of the most effective tactics, especially if you don't know what you're doing flying high, okay? Anyway, this was it, guys. 5 things that I think every pilot should know in top tier to actually do well in BVR, or in general to use radar missiles. It doesn't even need to be in BVR, because eventually you will be shot from far away, you will be needing to fly low, you will need to use chaff. So all of these are usages not only for the BVR fight, but beyond visual range fight, if you don't know what that means, but also for semi-active radar homing missiles usages in general. Okay, guys, I hope you enjoyed. Sorry for the long video, but hopefully it was instructive enough. Okay, see you guys. Bye. Subscribe.